It was a warm Sunday afternoon. Children were running around the playground, laughing and shouting with joy. The sun was shining, birds were chirping, and parents sat on benches, watching their kids play. A little black girl named Zora, only 7 years old, was playing near the swings. She wore a yellow dress, her hair tied in 2 small buns, and her face full of happiness. She loved the swings more than anything. Nearby, a white man named Mr. Collins stood with his 5-year-old son. Mr. Collins had a short temper. Everyone in the neighborhood knew it. He didn't smile much, and he didn't like when things didn't go his way. As Zora got off the swing, she noticed Mr. Collins' son looking at it. She smiled kindly and said, "You can have a turn." The boy smiled back, but before he could sit down, another boy ran and jumped onto the swing. Zora turned to the boy and said, "He was next." The boy ignored her and kept swinging. Mr. Collins saw everything, but instead of talking to the boys, he marched straight toward Zora. His face was red with anger. "What did you just say to him?" he shouted. Zora stepped back, confused and scared. I told him that your son was next." "Don't talk to him like that," he snapped. "Who do you think you are?" People around started to look. Some parents stood up, but it happened too fast. Without warning, Mr. Collins raised his hand and slapped the little girl across the face. Gasps filled the air. Children screamed. Zora fell to the ground, crying loudly, holding her cheek. A mother nearby shouted, "What is wrong with you? She's just a child." Parents ran over. One woman pulled Zora into her arms. A father called 911 immediately. Mr. Collins looked shocked at first. Then he tried to defend himself. "She was being rude," he shouted. "Kids these days have no manners." But no one believed him. The mark on Zora's face said everything. One parent yelled, "That's assault. You hit a child. You're going to jail." Mr. Collins backed away, but no one let him leave. People stood around him, blocking every exit. Zora was still crying. She kept saying, "I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything." Then they heard it. Sirens. A police car pulled up fast, stopping right by the playground gate. The doors opened, and out stepped a tall black man in uniform. He had strong shoulders, calm eyes, and a serious look on his face. He didn't say a word at first. He walked slowly through the crowd. He saw Zora, and his heart dropped. He rushed to her side and picked her up gently. "Baby, what happened?" he asked softly. Zora threw her arms around him and whispered, "Daddy, he hit me." The man looked at her face, then turned to face the crowd. His eyes locked on Mr. Collins. A parent whispered, "That's her father." Another added, "He's a cop." Suddenly, everything changed. Mr. Collins looked nervous now. He stuttered, I didn't know she was your daughter." The officer's face tightened. His voice was low but powerful. "You hit a child, my child. I didn't mean. Step aside." His voice was so calm, so cold, it sent chills through everyone around. He spoke into his radio. "We need backup. I have a suspect. Playground. Witnesses present." He gently handed Zora to another officer who arrived moments later. Then he walked toward Mr. Collins, slowly but firmly. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." "But I said I was sorry," Mr. Collins began. The officer didn't listen. He put the cuffs on him, reading his rights. "You're under arrest for assault on a minor." Parents clapped quietly. Some had tears in their eyes. Kids were hugging their mothers, scared and confused. But Zora's father held his head high. He didn't scream. He didn't lose control. He stood tall, because he knew justice had to speak louder than anger. As he placed Mr. Collins into the police car, he looked around at the crowd and said, "No child deserves this. Not now. Not ever." The door closed, and the playground, once full of laughter, fell completely silent. The sirens faded as the police car drove off, carrying Mr. Collins in the backseat. Parents slowly returned to their children. Some were still whispering. Others were simply silent, shocked by what had happened. But Officer James, Zora's father, stood still. He didn't speak. He didn't shout. He just stared at the spot where his daughter had cried. His hands were steady. His face was calm. But inside, something was burning. James had been a police officer for over 10 years. He had seen many things, robberies, shootings, arrests, but nothing had ever hit him like this. Because this time, it was his own daughter. He walked back to the swing. The yellow swing still moved gently in the wind. Zora's small backpack lay on the ground. He bent down and picked it up slowly. "Daddy?" Zora's soft voice came from behind. James turned. She was wrapped in a police blanket, sitting on the bench with another female officer beside her. He walked over, knelt down, and looked into her eyes. "Are you okay?" he asked. Zora nodded, but tears ran down her cheeks. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked quietly. "Why did he hit me?" James swallowed hard. He wanted to scream. He wanted to grab that man and shake the world. But instead, he pulled Zora close. "No, baby," he whispered. "You did nothing wrong. Nothing at all." James stood up and faced the crowd again. "I need statements from everyone who saw what happened," he said firmly. Parents stepped forward one by one. They told him exactly what they saw. How Zora was polite. How she offered the swing. How Mr. Collins shouted and hit her. One mother said, "Your daughter was being sweet. That man, he lost control. He hit her like she was nothing. But she's not nothing. She's everything." James nodded silently. Another father added, "We've seen him before. He always gets angry. Always has something rude to say." A teacher from the local school spoke next. "He's come to school yelling at teachers. Never listens. Always blames others." James took notes. He didn't show emotion. But inside, his rage grew stronger. Later that evening, James sat at the police station, watching the security footage from the playground. There it was, clear and sharp. Zora smiling, helping. Mr. Collins approaching. The slap. Zora falling. His hand clenched into a fist. Another officer walked in and said, "You sure you want to handle this case yourself?" James looked up. "I have to," he said, not just as her father. As a man. As a black man. As a cop. The officer nodded with respect. "Then we've got your back." Back at home, Zora lay in bed. Her mother sat beside her, holding her hand. James stood at the doorway, watching them. He had never felt so angry, yet so helpless. He walked into the kitchen, sat at the table, and put his head in his hands. He had trained his whole life to protect people. But today, he couldn't protect his own daughter from a stranger's hate. A knock came at the door. It was Officer Tanya, his close friend and trusted partner. She walked in quietly, placing a file on the table. "He's got a record," she said. James opened the file. Mr. Collins had 3 past complaints, one from a school, one from a grocery store, and another from a public park. All involved aggressive behavior. 2 involved racist remarks. But he always walked free with warnings. Not this time. James looked at Tanya. "This time, I want it all documented. Every word, every witness, every bruise." "You got it," she said. The next morning, James walked Zora to school himself. Some parents smiled at them. Some hugged Zora. A few cried. Zora held her father's hand tightly. She was scared, but she felt safe. Before she entered her classroom, she turned to him and asked, "Is that man going to hurt someone else?" James knelt down and said, "Not if I can help it." Zora nodded. "I love you, Daddy." He smiled. "I love you more." Later that day, James stood in front of the police board. He spoke to other officers. "This is not just about my daughter," he said. "This is about every child who is treated differently because of how they look." He looked around the room. Some officers nodded. Some looked uncomfortable. But silence is not strength. If we stay quiet, we are part of the problem. And as he left the room, he made a promise. He would not stop until Mr. Collins faced real justice. Because sometimes the strongest anger doesn't come with shouting. It comes with silence and action. News of the playground incident spread fast. By Monday morning, almost everyone in the community had heard what happened. Some had seen it with their own eyes. Others watched the security video that leaked online. The clip was only 20 seconds long, but it shook the whole town. People watched in disbelief as Mr. Collins raised his hand and struck a little girl. And then they saw the moment the officer, Zara's father, stepped out of the police car. And that moment changed everything. Outside the police station, reporters gathered. Cameras flashed. Microphones pointed. The building hadn't seen this much attention in years. Inside, Officer James sat behind his desk, his eyes heavy but focused. He had spent the night reviewing witness reports, camera footage, and Mr. Collins's records. He hadn't slept. He couldn't, not while the image of Zara holding her cheek kept haunting him. Suddenly, a knock came at the door. It was Tanya. "You need to come outside," she said. James looked confused. "Why?" She opened the blinds. "They're here." Hundreds of people stood outside. Mothers with strollers, fathers with their children, teenagers, teachers, old men and women, people of every race. They held signs. "Justice for Zara. Protect all children. We stand with Officer James. No more silence." The crowd wasn't loud. They didn't scream. They stood strong, united. James stepped outside. As soon as the crowd saw him, they clapped. Some shouted his name. Others waved. But he didn't raise his hand in pride. He stepped up to the microphone slowly, his face serious. "I never wanted this kind of attention," he said. "I've always done my job quietly. But this time, it's personal." He looked out into the crowd. He saw the teacher who gave Zara cookies on her first day. He saw the old librarian who once helped her find her favorite book. "I want to thank you all," he continued, "not just for supporting me, but for standing up for my daughter. For any child who's ever been treated unfairly." Someone in the crowd shouted, "We've got your back." He nodded. "This isn't just about what happened on that swing. This is about a man who thought it was okay to strike a child of color. And we must all say, it is never okay." Later that afternoon, in a small courtroom, Mr. Collins sat in an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed. He looked around nervously. The room was full. People whispered as he entered. The judge walked in. The room stood. Then silence. Mr. Collins's lawyer began, "Your Honor, my client did not mean to harm the child." He was upset. It was a moment of anger. "We ask for community service, not jail." But before the judge could speak, something surprising happened. One by one, witnesses stood up to speak. First, the woman who had comforted Zara on the playground came forward. She was polite. She offered the swing to his son. She did nothing wrong. Then came a teacher. "I've known Zara since she was in preschool. She's gentle, smart, and kind." A teenage boy stood next. "Mr. Collins yelled at me once for touching his fence. He always looks at kids like we're trouble." Then an older man stepped up. He wore a simple suit and held a cane. He cleared his throat. "My granddaughter was hit once by a man like this," he said softly. We stayed quiet. I won't stay quiet again. The courtroom was still. Even the judge looked moved. Back at home, Zara sat with her mom, coloring quietly. She asked, "Did the bad man go to jail?" Her mom smiled gently. "They're working on it, baby. People are speaking up. They're helping." Zara looked down. "I was really scared." Her mom pulled her close. It's okay to be scared, but you were brave. And now people are standing with you. At the end of the hearing, the judge spoke. This is not a case of a simple mistake. This is a case of violence against a child, and the community has made it clear they will not allow this to go unpunished. The room waited. Mr. Collins, the judge continued, you will remain in custody until trial. Your actions have caused fear, pain, and outrage, and justice must be served. Gasps of relief filled the room. Some people cried, others hugged. Mr. Collins lowered his head. He had no idea that hitting a little girl would wake up an entire town. Outside, Officer James stood on the courthouse steps. Reporters asked him for a statement. He looked at them, then said simply, "My daughter cried that day, but she won't cry alone." The people stood up, and that gives me hope. He turned and walked away. The courtroom was packed. It had been 3 weeks since the incident at the playground, and the day had finally come. The trial of Mr. Collins was about to begin. Every seat was taken. News cameras were set up outside. Parents, students, teachers, even strangers from other towns had come to watch. But no one was more focused than Officer James, Zora's father. He sat in the front row, wearing his police uniform, his hands folded tightly. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp, like a storm just waiting. Behind him, Zara sat quietly with her mother. She held her favorite stuffed bunny in her lap. Her legs dangled off the bench, swinging slowly. The judge entered. All rise. The trial had begun. Mr. Collins entered the courtroom in a dark suit. His face looked tired, his hair uncombed. He kept his head low, as if trying to hide from the stares around him. Beside him sat his lawyer, flipping through papers, whispering in his ear. On the other side, the state attorney stood tall. "We are here," the attorney said, "because a grown man attacked a 7-year-old girl. A child who did nothing wrong. A child whose only mistake was being kind and being black." A hush fell over the room. The first person called to the stand was the woman who had rushed to Zora's side that day. She pointed at Mr. Collins and said clearly, "I saw it all." Zora was kind. She gave up the swing. He walked over, shouted, and hit her. I couldn't believe it. I still can't. The next witness was a man who had recorded part of the incident. He handed over his phone. The video was played in court. The sound of Zora's tiny voice filled the room. "It's okay. You can have it." Then the loud voice of Mr. Collins yelling back, "Don't touch my kid's swing." And then a sharp, sickening slap. People in the courtroom turned their eyes away. Some gasped. A few cried. Zora looked down and hugged her bunny tighter. Then came the school principal. "We've had several reports from staff about Mr. Collins shouting at teachers and other parents," she explained. "This isn't new behavior." And then came a voice no one expected. It was another child, a boy from Zora's class. He stood nervously in front of the judge. "Mr. Collins yelled at me too once," he said, "just because I was talking to his son. I didn't even do anything bad." His voice cracked. The judge thanked him for being brave. Even Mr. Collins looked shaken. Then it was Officer James's turn. He stood tall and walked to the front. He took the oath. Then he looked straight ahead. "I've been a police officer for more than 10 years, he said, "but I've never felt pain like I did that day. Because it wasn't just some random victim. It was my daughter." He paused, looking at Mr. Collins. "And in that moment, I wasn't just a cop. I was a father. And I saw something no parent should ever see." He turned to the jury. "This case isn't about race alone. It's about respect, about protecting children, about standing up when someone crosses the line." The jury listened closely. Not a single person looked away. During the break, James walked outside. Reporters swarmed him. One asked, "Do you believe Mr. Collins is sorry?" James looked at her and said simply, "Sorry doesn't undo a slap. Sorry doesn't erase fear. What matters now is justice. Inside the courtroom, Mr. Collins finally took the stand. He looked nervous. His lawyer asked, "Did you mean to hurt the child?" He answered, "No, I was angry. My son was crying. I thought the girl pushed him. I lost control." The lawyer asked, "Do you believe you were treated unfairly because of the media attention?" Mr. Collins nodded. "Yes, I'm not a bad person." But when the state attorney stepped up, her voice was cold. "You said you lost control. But this isn't the first time, is it?" He stayed quiet. "You've yelled at children before. You've had warnings. You've even been told to stay away from school grounds. Isn't that true?" Mr. Collins didn't answer. He looked at the floor. "Do you understand," the attorney asked, "that your actions may have changed that little girl's life forever?" His eyes filled with tears, but he didn't speak. The judge ended the session for the day. "This court will continue tomorrow," she said. "All evidence will be considered before a final decision is made." People stood and began to leave. Some shook James's hand. Others hugged Zara. Outside the courthouse, someone placed a white rose on the steps. A small card beside it read, "For Zara, for every child who deserves to feel safe." That night, as the city lights glowed and the courtroom lights turned off, one thing was clear. This was more than just a trial. It was a message, a warning, and a fight for something bigger than justice. It was a fight for dignity. The next morning, the courtroom was even more crowded than before. News of the trial had spread across the state. People who had never met Zara or her family were now watching closely, following every update. Reporters filled the steps outside, microphones ready, cameras flashing. But inside, the air was quiet, heavy, as if everyone knew something big was coming. And they were right. Officer James arrived early with his wife and daughter. Zara was holding his hand, her other hand holding her bunny. She was brave, but her eyes showed that she still remembered everything. As they sat down, James noticed someone standing near the back, someone he hadn't seen in years. His expression changed. The woman nodded at him, and James knew this wasn't just any witness. This was the surprise the attorney had talked about last night. The judge entered. "All rise." After the formalities, the state attorney stood up and said, "Your Honor, we would like to call one final witness before we rest our case." The courtroom held its breath. "We call Ms. Diana Collins to the stand." A loud whisper spread through the room. Diana Collins, Mr. Collins' ex-wife. Even Mr. Collins looked stunned. His face went pale. He whispered to his lawyer, but the judge raised her hand. "Let the witness speak." Diana walked to the front of the court. She looked calm, but everyone could feel the weight she carried. She raised her hand and took the oath. Then, slowly, she sat down. "Ms. Collins," the attorney began, "you were married to the defendant." "Yes," she said quietly, "for 8 years. And you are the mother of his son." "Yes." "Can you tell us about your time with him?" Diana nodded. "At first, things were normal. But over time, he changed. He became angry, controlling, especially around people who didn't look like him." The room went silent. "You mean people of color?" "Yes, he used to say awful things. About black kids, about neighbors. He believed they didn't belong in our schools or parks." Mr. Collins slammed his fist on the table. "That's not true." The judge banged her gavel. "Mr. Collins, one more outburst and you'll be held in contempt." He sat down, red-faced and breathing heavily. Diana continued, "I left him when he screamed at a little boy at the grocery store, just for accidentally bumping into our cart. That boy was black too." She paused and looked at Zara. "When I saw the news about what happened to that sweet little girl, I knew I had to come forward." The attorney asked, "Why didn't you speak earlier?" "I was afraid," she admitted. "But then I saw her face on the news, and I remembered my own son crying after hearing his father yell at other kids." She turned to the jury. This isn't about one moment. It's about a pattern. A deep anger that's been there for years. Mr. Collins stared at her in shock. His lawyer didn't even try to stop her. The courtroom was frozen. Even the judge looked emotional. After Diana stepped down, the state attorney stood once more. "We rest our case, Your Honor." The defense attorney looked like he had nothing left. He stood up and said, "No further witnesses." The judge nodded. "The jury will now be given time to consider all evidence. We will resume tomorrow with closing arguments." Everyone rose as the judge left the room, but no one said a word. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions at Diana. "Are you afraid of him?" She replied, "Not anymore. Not when children are being hurt." One reporter asked, "What do you think should happen now?" Diana looked directly into the camera. "I think justice needs to speak louder than hate." Later that night, James sat beside Zora's bed. She looked up at him. "Daddy, will he go to jail?" James brushed her hair gently. "That's up to the court, baby. But no matter what happens, you're safe now. You're brave, and I'm proud of you." She smiled softly and closed her eyes. James looked out the window at the stars. He wasn't just thinking about tomorrow's verdict. He was thinking about how many other little girls never got justice, how many voices stayed silent, and how one small voice, Zora's voice, was now being heard around the world. The sun rose slowly over the courthouse, but inside Officer James's home, the morning felt heavy. It was the day of the verdict. Zora sat at the breakfast table, her bunny next to her plate. She wasn't eating much. Her small fingers played with the edge of her toast. James knelt beside her. "No matter what the jury says today, you did something very brave," he told her. Zora looked up at him. "Will the bad man go to jail?" James gave a soft smile. "Let's go find out together." The courthouse was packed again. Even more cameras. Even more people standing outside holding signs. Some signs said, "Justice for Zora. No child should be afraid to play. Hold adults accountable." Inside, the courtroom was silent. Tension filled the room like fog. Mr. Collins sat stiffly with his lawyer, his face unreadable. Zora sat between her parents, holding her mother's hand tightly. The jury walked in. 12 faces, all serious, all focused. The judge looked up. "Has the jury reached a decision?" The foreman stood. "Yes, Your Honor." The courtroom held its breath. The judge nodded. "Please read the verdict." The foreman took a deep breath. "On the charge of assaulting a minor, we find the defendant guilty." Gasps, whispers. Some people clapped quietly before the judge raised her hand for silence. Zora's eyes grew wide. She looked at her father. "What does that mean?" James leaned in. "It means they believe you." But it wasn't over yet. The judge looked directly at Mr. Collins. "You have been found guilty of a serious crime. You struck a child in public. You caused emotional trauma. And this court has seen a pattern of anger and prejudice in your behavior." Mr. Collins looked down, saying nothing. The judge continued. "This court sentences you to 2 years in prison and mandatory anger management therapy. You are also ordered to stay away from the victim and her family. Forever." Gasps again. Zora's mother covered her mouth in shock. James closed his eyes and let out a long breath. Justice, real justice. As Mr. Collins was taken away, he finally looked at James. There was no more arrogance in his eyes, only shame. But James didn't look back. He was already turning toward his daughter. Outside the courtroom, the crowd burst into cheers. "Zora! Zora!" Reporters rushed toward the family. One asked, "Officer James, what does this verdict mean to you?" James held his daughter in his arms and replied, "It means the system can work. It means people saw the truth. And it means my daughter, and every other child like her, matters." Another reporter asked Zora, "Do you have anything you want to say?" Zora thought for a moment, then said in a small voice, "Don't be mean to kids. Just let us play." The crowd clapped. It was simple and powerful. That evening, social media exploded. Clips of the verdict went viral. The video of Mr. Collins yelling, the powerful words from Zora's father, and especially Diana Collins's brave testimony, all were being shared everywhere. Hashtag Justice for Zora began trending. Celebrities posted about it. Teachers used it as an example in classrooms. Parents everywhere told their children about a little girl who stood strong. Zora didn't know any of this. She was sitting on her bed, eating ice cream. Her bunny was beside her, and her father was reading her a bedtime story. "Daddy," she said, "do you think he'll be better when he gets out of jail?" James closed the book and looked at her. "I don't know, baby," he said honestly, "but I hope so." Zora nodded. "Me too." Then she looked out the window at the night sky. "It's nice to feel safe again," she whispered. And in that moment, in that small bedroom filled with love and quiet strength, the story of a little girl who stood up to hate reached its most powerful point. Not in court, not in the news, but in her heart. She had won. 3 months had passed since the verdict. Zora was back to smiling again. She laughed on the swings, raced on the slides, and danced in the grass at the same playground where the nightmare began. But this time, something had changed. Not just in Zora. In the whole town. People looked at each other differently now. With more care. With more kindness. The story had touched hearts across the country. But for Officer James and his family, life was finally returning to normal. Until one morning, an envelope arrived at their home. James opened the mailbox like he did every day. Bills, flyers, and then a small white envelope. No return address, just his name. He turned it over in his hands. The handwriting was neat, careful. He walked inside and sat at the kitchen table. Zora was playing with crayons nearby. His wife was making tea. James slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. He read the first line and froze. "Dear Officer James, this is hard for me to write, but I hope you read it with an open heart." James's wife saw his face and came closer. He kept reading. "My name is Robert Collins. Yes, the same man who hurt your daughter. I don't expect your forgiveness. I probably don't deserve it. But I need to say something that's been on my chest since the day the courtroom doors closed behind me." James's eyes moved quickly now. "I didn't grow up around people who looked different from me. I was taught things. Bad things. I believed them without asking why. And for years, I carried hate in my heart. I thought it made me strong. I thought it made me right. But I was wrong. That day at the playground, I didn't just hurt your daughter. I hurt myself. And I hurt something I didn't even understand." James paused, his throat tight. Zora looked up. "Daddy, what's wrong?" He smiled gently. "Nothing, baby. Just reading something important." He turned back to the letter. "In prison, they'd made me attend therapy. At first, I refused to talk. I didn't want to change. I thought everyone was just against me. But then one day, a little girl came to visit her dad. She was black, like Zora. She looked at me and smiled. She reminded me of your daughter. She didn't know who I was. She just waved at me like I was anyone else." That moment broke me. I realized I'd spent my whole life building walls. And now, I want to tear them down. The letter went on. "Please tell Zora I'm sorry. I don't expect her to forgive me. But if she ever wonders if people can change, tell her yes, because I'm trying, and it's because of her." At the bottom was a shaky signature. Robert Collins. James sat back in his chair, the letter shaking slightly in his hands. His wife wiped a tear from her cheek. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Zora walked over and climbed into her father's lap. "What's in the letter, Daddy?" James looked at her. "It's from someone who made a very bad mistake," he said gently. She tilted her head. Is he sorry now? James nodded. Yes, he's very sorry. Zora was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled. Then I hope he becomes nice. That night, James sat at his desk and took out a pen. He wrote just one line on a card. We believe people can change. Thank you for trying. He sealed the card and placed it in the envelope. For the first time in a long while, something felt lighter in his chest. Not because he forgot what happened, but because hate lost that day, and hope had won. Weeks later, Zara stood in front of her class for show and tell. She held her bunny in one hand and a drawing in the other. The drawing showed a playground. Happy kids, a blue sky, a big tree, and in the middle, a small girl smiling wide. This is me, she said. This is where I play now. I wasn't happy here before, but now I feel safe. The teacher smiled warmly. Why do you feel safe now? Zara looked around and said, because even when bad things happen, good people help. And sometimes, even the bad ones try to be better. The room was quiet. A few eyes filled with tears. Zora didn't notice. She was already skipping back to her seat, her bunny bouncing behind her. And just like that, a story that began with pain ended with hope. Because one little girl was brave enough to speak up, and the world was brave enough to listen. 1 year had passed since that terrible day at the playground. And now, Zara was no longer the scared little girl who hid behind her father's leg. She was confident. She was strong. And she had something to say. The letter from Mr. Collins started something unexpected. People from around the country began writing letters to Zara and her family. Letters from teachers, parents, even former bullies. They all wrote to say the same thing. You gave us hope. One day, Zora's school got a call from a big human rights group. They were organizing a global children's peace summit, and they wanted Zara to be the youngest speaker. Her parents were shocked. Zara was only 8. But when they asked her, she didn't hesitate. I want to tell people the truth, she said. That kids should feel safe, and that everyone deserves kindness. The big day arrived. The event was held in a beautiful hall in Washington, D.C. The crowd was filled with leaders, teachers, activists, and children from over 40 countries. Zara stood backstage holding her stuffed bunny, her hands a little sweaty. Her mom knelt down beside her. Just be you, she whispered. That's more than enough. When Zara stepped onto the stage, lights flashed, cameras rolled. The room went silent. A small stool had been placed behind the podium so she could reach the mic. She took a deep breath, then began to speak. Hi, my name is Zora. 1 year ago, I was just a kid on a playground. I was happy. Then someone hit me because of how I looked, because I was different. Gasps echoed through the room. But I didn't stay quiet. My family helped me, and we stood up together. She looked around the hall. Some people said I was too young to understand, but kids understand a lot. We know when something is wrong, and we know when someone is hurting. She paused. I still remember the man who hit me, but I also remember the day he said sorry, and I believe he meant it. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the audience. Zara smiled. I don't hate him. I hope he becomes better. I hope we all do. Then she held up a paper with big letters she had drawn herself. Kindness is stronger than fear. The crowd stood. Applause thundered through the hall. Many had tears in their eyes. Zara didn't really understand why they clapped so long. She just knew she had told the truth. And that was enough. After the speech, Zora's story went viral again. News channels replayed her speech. Schools used it in their classrooms. Even the president sent her a handwritten note that said, "You are the voice of a better future." But for Zara, the biggest surprise came weeks later. A small envelope arrived in the mail. No address, just her name. Inside was a folded photo and a short note. It was a picture of Mr. Collins. He was standing in front of a classroom, holding a chalkboard that read, "My past was wrong, but I choose to teach better now." The note said, "I got a job at a community center. I'm teaching kids how to talk about anger. I use your name as an example of courage. Thank you for helping me change. Robert Collins." Zara stared at the letter. She looked at her dad. "Do people really change?" James smiled. "Yes, baby. Sometimes they do." That night, Zara stood at her window, looking up at the stars. She whispered, "I hope every kid like me gets to feel safe. And I hope the world listens." And maybe, just maybe, it already was.